Alrighty. This thing work? It does. Whoa, it's got to be close. Check this out. Oh, I got a lot of stuff. Everything John said is not true. Every time he announces me, it's something completely different. Before I get into what I am going to talk about, how many of you train other people? By show of hands, please. Cool. How many of you guys are leaders? Okay. Why was there a difference between the two hands? For those of you who didn't raise your hand, what the hell is wrong with you? Right? That's what I want to talk to you guys about, is leadership. Because leadership is what I think is lacking most in this country right now. And I think you guys have more of an effect than you realize. You guys are interfacing with society. You guys are getting your hands on kids. You're getting your hands on parents. And if you were to go into a space where it was full of SEALs, average operational size of 14 to 16 guys, and you ask a group of SEALs, who in this room is a leader? How many hands do you think go up? Every single one, instantaneously. Why? Because we train them to do that. We teach them from day one that they're a leader, and I don't see that in our society. So I'm not going to talk about strength and conditioning, because quite frankly, I don't give a shit about barbells. I mean, I kind of do, but I'm so tired of talking about it for so many years that I just don't want to do it anymore, so bear with me, okay? I worked for CrossFit for 8 years. If I never see another squat for the rest of my life, it would be an amazing thing. So we're going to talk about important stuff, leadership. We're going to talk about you guys. And before I do that, I got to teach you at least a little bit about what it means to be a SEAL or where we come from, so there's some context layered into it. So how many of you have seen a movie about SEALs? And don't lie to me. Okay. For those of you that didn't raise your hand, you're lying to me. It's fine. We can start like this if you want to. How many of you have read a book about SEALs? Okay, they're all shit. Every single one of them is completely inaccurate. So if you saw it in a book, or read it in a book, or saw it on a screen, regardless of the size, it's not accurate. So you got to kind of bring people back to what it is that we do and where we come from, and then we can talk about how we develop leadership inside of the SEAL teams, because it's taught. It's not something that we just throw at people and we expect them to be able to understand. Just like strength and conditioning. How do you get stronger at squatting? You squat. I don't see people teaching leadership, and I think that it puts us on a very dangerous trajectory as a country. You guys have a chance to impact that at a micro level. It can have a macro impact. All right, so SEALs. We started in 1942, and we were the UDT, Underwater Demolition Team. And I'll cover this really quick. Not necessarily that important, but again, context. Who's seen the movie Saving Private Ryan? Okay, if you don't raise your hand, you're a bad American, because that movie's awesome. A UDT guy makes an appearance in Saving Private Ryan. So in the 40s, there's a point on every beach called the high water line. So at the highest tide of any given day in the year, the water will only go so high. If you put a pin in the ground, that's where the job of the UDT ended. We were physically not allowed to go past that point. That was for the Army, that was for the Marines. They own the land. So in Saving Private Ryan, they're getting shot at from the hills, and they're hiding behind this metal obstacle. And this guy comes running up, and he goes, "Hey, you guys need to get out of here, because I have to blow up this obstacle." And he pulls a blasting cap out of his helmet, which is an explosive device. So it's probably not a good idea to have in your helmet, just from a technical perspective, right? But that was a UDT guy. That's what we did. We surveyed beaches. We blew up obstacles so the Army and the Marines could haul ass through the any engagement that they might have and get into the fighting arena that they were going to encounter. That's what we did until 1962. President Kennedy realized that the trajectory and shape of war was changing, and so he created SEAL Team 1 and SEAL Team 2. And what that really did is that took the pin out of the ground. We still largely operated from the water. Most of the stuff that we did started in the water. We would go onto the land, and then we'd go back into the water. But it let off a little bit of the pressure and restrictions. Shortly after that, obviously, Vietnam. And in Vietnam, SEALs, that's probably the first time that most people heard about SEALs was the action that we saw in Vietnam. It's called direct action and engagement, or seeking to go out to an enemy territory to find an enemy force to engage with them. Like, that's the job of what it is that you're trying to do. And then after Vietnam, there was Grenada, Panama, Mogadishu. Anybody know what year Mogadishu was? Another good movie you guys should all watch, Black Hawk Down. Who's seen it? Awesome movie. Captures some of the good essence. It's very accurate in some ways. 1993 was Mogadishu. So at the end of Vietnam until Mogadishu, nobody was doing anything that was for real. It was all conceptual. And when I say people saw action in Mogadishu, there was 4 SEALs that were there with the Army guys. So out of an entire community, only 4 people post-Vietnam actually did anything. Then 1993 to 2001, we did nothing because there was nothing to do except for sit around and talk about how badass we were going to be in case something did happen. We were very good at that, and we did a lot of that, usually in combination with alcohol. And so then 9/11 kicked off, and we sucked for like 2 years because we were relying on what we were taught, and all of the tactics that I was taught when I became a SEAL were based around Vietnam because it was the last time they were tested. So I showed up into Afghanistan on my first deployment there with a set of dive fins. It's controversial, right? Not a lot of water in Afghanistan, not a lot of diving. It was rough. It was a rough 2 years of us looking inward and realizing that we were completely tied to a tactic. And we had no basis for it. And it took our leadership to pull us out of that and strip us away from being tied to how we do something to just successfully completing the mission. 2006, there was another huge tactical shift. 2011, there was another huge tactical shift. And even in the modern day, it doesn't look anything like it did back in the UDT. It doesn't look anything like it did 5 years ago. So it used to be every 20 years we would innovate. Then it became every 10, then it became every 5. And there's a reason why when the military commanders found bin Laden, they have access to every military unit available, and they chose the SEAL team. There's a reason for that. It's because of how we operate together. It's because of the teamwork, but teams need one critical thing. And what is it? Leadership. Which brings me to how we create that and how we actually facilitate that inside of the SEAL teams. And I want you guys to think of this in terms of, are you guys affiliate owners? Who's an affiliate owner here? Okay. Think of this in terms of how you run your affiliate. If you're a trainer and you work with other trainers, think of this in the terms of how you conduct yourself. Because there's 2 types of leadership. And I talk all over the world about leadership, and it's very interesting to me because I'll get hit up and they'll say, as an example, next week I'm talking at a company that does fertilizer. And they literally called me and they're like, can you do a talk on fertilizer leadership? It's like, well, sure, of course I can. And then I was in Asia 2 months ago talking to financial people. Can you give us some insight into leadership in the financial sector? Yeah, I can. Because there's 2 types. Good and bad. Effective and ineffective. That's it. Everything else is complete bullshit. It's a total excuse. It's a way to not look yourself in the mirror and hold yourself accountable. There is no IT-specific leadership. There is no fertilizer-specific leadership. There's no strength and conditioning specific leadership. There's just good leadership principles. So when I'm going through this stuff, I'm going to give you guys the qualities that we look for. I'm going to give you the mechanisms that we use to lead. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the mindset, and we'll end with just a little bit of how we make decisions. Because again, we teach all of these things. We don't throw anybody into the grinder and expect them to be able to do this stuff. It starts the first day of training, which for SEALs is called BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. And the emphasis has to be on the B. It is so basic, it's not even funny. You do not know how to be a SEAL when you finish training. You know how to be extremely dangerous because you think you know everything and you know exactly nothing. Probably the place I think most people who are graduating 4-year institution of higher learning are probably sitting at, right? They know a lot, they think. Experience, goose egg. Very dangerous spot to be. BUDS is interesting going through as a student, and it was more interesting when I went back as an instructor, and John actually came down a few times and got to witness some of the evolutions. But if you look at the students, they all look the same, absent some height differences. They all could look like they could be professional athletes. And on the first day of training, we sit down every class, and we ask them, who wants to be a SEAL? How many hands do you think go up? Every single one. How many of you guys are going to be here on the last day? All of them go up. And on the last day, roughly 15% of the people are generally there. They all look the same. Professional athletes, triathletes, you name it, Olympic athletes, 15% of the people are still there at the end of the day. And the reason that I bring it up is BUD/S is not physical. It's all between the ears. Leadership is between the ears. Accountability is between the ears. Impacting the world that we live in is between the ears. It all starts between the ears. So this is where we start our training. What we're looking for a leader, and BUD/S is unique because it's one of the only military programs that officer and enlisted go through side by side. A lot of military training pipelines, they separate the two. The officers go through their section, the enlisted guys go through theirs. And it creates problems because the experience and the origins are slightly different. We don't have that in our community, and I think it's one of the things that makes us unique. First thing you got to have, you got to be humble. Humility is one of the most important characteristics of a leader. Very easy to point out an egotistical person, an egotistical leader that thinks they know more than everybody else. Can everybody think of somebody they've worked with in their life that exudes that? Okay, you need to be the opposite of that. Recognize that in other people and immediately try to beat it out of yourself. We had tools as instructors and we could physically beat it out of them. It was awesome. It shortens the learning curve. You guys are going to be absent those tools. But how many of you train kids? You understand what I'm talking about? Start early. Have these conversations with them. Because if you don't stop that stuff early, it's not going to get any better. It's not going to get any better when somebody's not standing over their shoulders watching what's going on. If you can be humble, you can be self-aware. And by self-aware, I mean you can go look in the mirror and actually assess your strengths and weaknesses. Most people can't do that. I struggle with doing it. I'm not perfect at it by any stretch of the imagination. I'd love to think that, I exude all of these qualities that I'm going to go over all the time, but I know that I don't. It's a constant struggle, but you can recognize and correct for it if you're humble and you're self-aware. Number 2, accountability. And we demand this from day one. Now, if you own an affiliate or you work with people or you're a boss, accountability shows itself all the time. And you have an excellent opportunity probably every single day. You have this chance as a parent as well too. Whether you want to accept accountability or you want to push it off on other people. And this is what it looks like. In the SEAL teams, we do a ton of training. Like 80% of your life is training. Like the movies, another thing I hate about the movies, what shows up in a movie is like 0.01% of what it actually means in a career. 80% of the time you're training. In every training evolution you do, we do a huge debrief or after action report. And for like 30 seconds, we talk about things that went right. And 2 hours, we talk about things that went wrong. And every element in every phase has a leader. Even if it's only 2 people, which is our minimum fighting size is 2 people. There's a senior person that comes up and talks about what went right and what went wrong on every phase of the operation. It's usually the junior officer. You see a lack of accountability in how they describe what happened. So as an example, let's say your job was you were going to go and clear. Our job was we were coming from over there and we had to come clear this building. And it didn't go as planned. The person who is not being accountable will say things like, I tasked Luke with, which would be a bad idea in general, tasking him with anything. But I tasked Luke with, I told him to come through the front door and he was supposed to come through the front door and he went to the left. And then I tasked Frank with going over to the door on the west side and he was supposed to come in and they were going to meet in the middle. And it didn't go as planned. And, we weren't successful because Luke, he didn't do what I told him to do. And Frank, he went the other direction. You see who's getting the blame in that situation? A leader is coming up and saying, hey, we would have been successful, but the guys who worked for me, they didn't do the right thing. That's not being accountable. That's pushing the buck to the people that work for you, okay? You want to be accountable, and what we're looking for in SEAL officers, and we stop those guys, as soon as they start that crap, we stop them right there. Because what you want to say as a leader when you're accountable is you're like, listen, it didn't go as planned. I told Luke to come to the front door and I told him to go left, but he went right because he didn't understand what I was saying because my guidance wasn't clear enough. And we're gonna have a conversation. It's not gonna happen again. It's covered. I told Frank to come over to the door. I told him to come in and meet in the middle, but I wasn't clear in what I told him. So I'm gonna fix that too. It's gonna be clear and we're gonna take care of it. You guys see the difference between the two? It's true with working with kids. I try to practice this even with my own kids. It's so easy to look at what happens to you in your life and say it's somebody else's fault. You have to stop that and take accountability for everything that you have your fingers in. That's how you lead. If you want to be a follower your whole life, push it off to somebody else. If you want to be a leader, protect the people that work for you and take accountability for that. If you own an affiliate and somebody shows up late, it's not their fault. It's your fault. Because you didn't explain to them the importance of coming in early and getting there, getting the class set up. You guys see the difference there? It's huge. Along with that, guidance is a huge one. If you want to make something really complicated, use 100 words. Especially if you could have gotten the message across with 10. We have a great training tool in the military that's hard to replicate, and it's a radio. Most of the time, I was not co-located with the people that I worked with, so I had to be really clear and concise about what I said. And you can tell people who think about what they want to say before they key the radio. Because my favorite thing to hear is somebody come up on the radio, it's like, shh, and then they let it go. Like, yes, I can't wait to talk about that later. Because they didn't think about what they were saying, right? Before you go and tell somebody to do something, think about it. And before every time I got on the radio, I'd think about what I was going to say. I would literally say it to myself in my head, key the mic, say it in as few words as possible, and then let it go. Clear, concise guidance, okay? As far as some characteristics, the most infectious quality of a leader that I've ever seen is calm under fire. And in the business world, it could be, keeping your head on your shoulders or maintaining control of your emotions. However you want to think of it, it is infectious. Can all of you think of an example in your life where you've worked for somebody who is senior to you, who should probably have the answers, and for whatever reason, life starts coming off the rails a little bit and that person starts getting excited? They start getting a little anxious. They start getting a little frustrated. What does that do to everybody else that works for them? Everybody, it's like a rising tide. It's crazy to hear over the radio when that happens. When people, you can hear the emotion in their voice and you can look around and you can see everybody's stress levels start to elevate. It's infectious and it's insidious. The beauty of being calm under fire is that the other side of the coin is also true. If you can maintain control of your emotions, regardless of what's going on around you, it's also infectious. When you're working for somebody and it just seems like life is just throwing glass at you and nothing is going the way you want to, and it's just like water off the duck's back. I mean, to me, especially in combat, that instills even more confidence in people who have already earned my trust in training for years. But there was nothing better than being in a gunfight, other than being in a gunfight, but hearing, and they're scary. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, I hate the movies. I've hidden behind some walls like you wouldn't believe. I've done some very not brave stuff. And when you hear over the radio a dude who's in the same situation that you're in, cool as a cucumber, just rattling off instructions, and you're like, what's wrong with me? Like, that guy is totally fine. Maybe it's not as bad as I think. And that has nothing to do with combat. Think about a argument with your spouse. That's a fun one, right? Have a contest to see who can control their emotions better. Start the baby steps with this one. Baby steps with that one. But in business, stuff's not going to go the way that you want it to, but who cares? Maintain control of your emotions. If you work for and with people, if you're a trainer of kids and kids start seeing you get stressed out at very simple stuff that at the end of the day doesn't mean shit, what do they learn from that? Lessons that they're going to keep for the rest of their life. That's what I'm saying. You guys have more input than you probably realize. Maintain control of your emotions. It's learned through exposure and through practice. So for me, I had to set triggers for myself. And this requires you to kind of view yourself from about 3 feet away. Looking in and saying, hey, am I feeling anxious right now? Okay, if I am, I need to stop and take a knee. Take a breath. It's not going to impact anything. And you got to do it with how you behave sometimes too. So for me, the rule I made for myself was that I would never run unless I was about to die, and then I would run faster than Usain Bolt, and then I would not run again. There's a time and place for everything, but I found when I ran in any situation other than that, what did everybody else around me do? I started running. When I walked, regardless of how bad the situation seemed to be, everybody calmed down. That's the power that a leader has. A lot of this stuff is invisible and you won't even recognize that you're doing it, but you have to set the triggers for yourself. If you can do that, if you can be humble, you can be accountable, clear and concise guidance, calm under fire, you can get to the actual role of what being a leader is. And that is maintaining your situational awareness. John and I were talking over at the side before we started about, people lose the forest for the trees. It's not everybody's job to look for the forest. It's not everybody's job to navigate their way through the trees. Somebody has to have their head up looking at the bigger picture. If you're micromanaging your people, or you're emotionally compromised in something that's happening, or your ego, or a plan of something that you want to have happen, your ego is so tied to it, all of that does is that erodes your ability to see what's actually going on. And to use the analogy of a chess or a checkerboard, people when they first start as leaders generally can only see the square that they're in and maybe one square in front of them and to the left and to the right. Whereas a good leader looks at the entire board. Your job is to lead, not do your people's jobs for them. And it requires practice to do that. John and I were talking about he doesn't like doing the administrative stuff, which is why he has his little bitch known as Luke. But I'm sorry. I wasn't supposed to use your official title, right? All right, sorry. He's actually bigger than me. And I was talking to John, I'm like, hey, here's the deal, man. It's not your job to do that. Because what's John's job to do? He's got his hand on the ship, right? He's steering the ship in the direction he wants it to go. He doesn't need to run back and put coal in the burner. If he does that, who's got their hand on the wheel? I don't know. It's not John, though. Okay? Situational awareness is the most important thing of a leader, up and out. If you have people that are working for you, you need to maintain contact with them to the degree you can make sure that they're doing their job, but then you got to get out of their space. And we'll talk about empowering versus micromanaging here in a second. But you look down to make sure everything's going the way that you want it to, and then you lift your head up so you can see problems coming on the horizon. You look down to make sure everything's going the way you want, and you look your head back up, right? If you're an affiliate owner, you don't need to be teaching every class if you have the people to do it. You don't need to be sitting there over their shoulder making sure that everything is perfect the way that you want it to be. You need to make sure that you're checking in enough, and then lift your head up and run your business, right? If you're an affiliate owner, run your business, not your class. Does that make sense to you guys? The huge difference between the two. You can run a class as an affiliate owner, but do you really want your trainer having his hand on the wheel of your business? All right, it's an important concept. Those are the qualities that we're looking for in leaders. When it comes to actually leading people, and this again dives right back into if you train people or you work in teams or you are a business owner, the theory we operate in on the SEAL teams is called Decentralized Command, which is basically the opposite of micromanagement. Think of it as anti-micromanagement. If people who work for you come to you and say, what do you want me to do? You are a micromanager. You need to think about that. If you have people who work for you and they consistently come to you and say, hey, what is it you want me to do? It is because of your leadership style that they're doing that. You are not empowering your people if they ask that question. Decentralized command is the opposite, where you empower your people to find problems and then the solutions on their own. And they come to you and say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And because you have, as a leader, your head up and you see the up and out, you go, okay, cool. That fits in line with where I'm trying to get us. Go execute. You check in with them a little bit. You guys see the difference between the two? It's, if you have people coming to you and saying, hey, what do you want me to do? Stop and think about how you're managing yourself as a leader. It has to be trained and practiced. Because the easiest thing to say is, or to do, is to not want to put in the effort for yourself and just let somebody else do it for you. That's not the long-term strategy for success. All right, so leading. Actually, let me go back one. What do you think most people ask you, what do you want me to do? What are they actually afraid of? Doing the wrong thing and failing. It's fear of failure. In my mind, you will never be effective in life until you experience failure over and over and over again, because then it doesn't bother you. You use it as a motivation, not a stumbling block. They have to experience failure. If you're a good boss, I'll ask you guys this question. If you manage a team and your team is successful, who gets the credit? You guys are thinking about this. You're like, well, I'd really like to take credit for that. The team. How much credit does the boss take if the team's successful? Zero. None. If the team fails, who takes responsibility? The boss does, and it goes no farther down. So think about that environment and how if you create that environment, people won't have fear of failure. Because they know if they make a mistake, let's say you make a mistake and even you as the boss are reporting to somebody else, it's not going to be catastrophic because you're going to protect them. You're facilitating an environment of empowerment and growth versus if something does go wrong, you'd be like, oh yeah, it was Luke. He's right over there. You should go talk to him. One's long-term strategy for success. The other one's a long-term strategy for failure. So when it comes to leading people, you have two choices. You can push people and you can pull people. Traditionally, what I have seen is pushing. And this is the classic misconception people have about the military. Full Metal Jacket. Have you guys seen that movie? It's awesome. You should watch it. Every day that ends in Y. The military drill instructor, the Marine Corps dude just rattling it out, choking people with his own hand, like that's what people think the military is. And it's how the military starts, but that's not how the military is after 2 months when you're in. There is no drill instructor running around saying, choke me or choke yourself with my own hand 10 years into being a SEAL. It doesn't exist. They do that because they're breaking people with the sense of self, but it's the classic example of externally imposed discipline. Somebody who stands over your shoulder, the micromanager that not only tells you what the job is, but how you're going to do it, and then sits there while you do it. Has anybody ever worked for a boss like that? By a show of hands, who hasn't worked for a boss like that? Never? You haven't lived. For those of you who have worked for a boss like that, what's the only thing going through your mind when the micromanager's over your shoulder? I'm going to do as little as humanly possible until you leave me alone, right? And then what? Then who knows? But definitely not what that guy wants you to do. Micromanagement works when you're in the room. What if you have a family emergency, you got to go away for 2 weeks, and you're micromanaging your affiliate in the way that you own it? Like, you're going to come back to a different environment that you left because guess what? That push, that externally imposed discipline is gone, and people are going to run wild. Let's go to the other side. Pull. How do you pull your people? You have to use a scary word to do this. You have to inspire them. Inspiration, it's not that hard. You do it by setting the example. Think of somebody you've worked for that is the opposite of the micromanager. It could be your parents. It could be somebody you've worked with anywhere in corporate America, but somebody you had an immense amount of respect for. They were knowledgeable. They were senior. They earned your trust and respect. How hard would you work not to let that person down? People are like, oh, I'd work 150%. It's not possible because only 100% is possible. But you get the point, right? You'll bend over backwards. You'll break yourself not to let that person down. Not because they're yelling at you, because you're trying to live up to the example that they set, because they inspired you. What happens when that person's not around? Do you still do the right thing? More often than not. More often than the micromanager that you can't stand, you're like, just get out of here so I can update my Facebook status and waste your time all day, right? Huge difference between the two. How do you inspire people? I don't know. How about you start by being humble? How about you are accountable? Clear and concise guidance, right? How about you maintain control of your emotions regardless of what's going on? How about you are situationally aware and you protect your team? You give them the credit when things go well. You just had the best month ever at your affiliate, more signups than ever. You need to reward your staff, not yourself. That's how you inspire people. When should you start doing this? This is another question that's usually that I follow up with, so when I speak in corporate America, I will ask everybody, like, okay, who here is a leader? And they all just go like, they're like, look around. What's wrong with you people? Like, when's the time to start? Like right now. Think about this. I'm assuming you all have your driver's license. How many of you would have attempted the driving test, have never spent a second behind the wheel in a manual transmission vehicle, just roll up to the DMV and be like, I'm here, I'm ready for my test? What would the results be? Catastrophic. And what would people say to you? Of course, you're an idiot. Why do people treat leadership differently? You're going to wait until you're in a job that you think has leadership characteristics or roles to start learning this stuff? You're going to fail. Leadership is as much a professional license as driving, but it's never taught that way. It's never looked at that way. And we wonder why people fail. You have to practice these things over time. So if you don't have a position in your life right now that has the credentials or the abbreviations that make you feel like you're a leader, that's fine. Lead by example. It has nothing to do with what's on your shoulder in the military or what's on your business card. Set the example. Lead by example. You'll be better for it when you get into that position, whenever the story arc of your life takes you there. Oh boy, here we go. Mindset. So over the course of my career, people view my career as being lucky or unlucky. It kind of just depends on your perspective. But I planned and executed hundreds of combat operations. How many of them do you think went as planned? Absolutely none. Which is a problem if you don't know how to make decisions and you're emotionally tied to your plans. So, mindset. This might be how you're programming for somebody, right? You got an awesome athlete that's coming in, you're like, dude, I got you. Check out this book. This is your programming for the next 6 months. Okay? The guy with an ego, when things don't go as planned, he just goes to the next page in the book because it's not his plan that's wrong. The key of what that guy is trying to do is successfully execute the plan, which is a mistake. You want to successfully complete the mission, which speaks to mindset. An amazing plan executed well that terminates in a failure, you guys understand it's completely valueless, right? I'd rather have a 50% plan that I modify on the fly and am successful. That's how I achieve where I want to go. And that's the way that you guys need to look at it. You have to detach your ego from the plan. We got to talk about a little bit about emotions because ego and emotions are tied. How do emotions and how much you want something to happen affect outcome? Anyone? 0. This is going to be a tough one for the women. How do your emotions... This is the point where my wife starts throwing things at me. No, it's tough. Emotions actually do affect outcome. The problem with them is it's not positive. You can want something as much as you want. You can be passionate about it. You can be frustrated. You can be angry. Fill in the emotion that you want to. It's not going to move the needle in a positive direction, but it will cloud your judgment. It impacts your situational awareness because when you start getting frustrated, it pulls you from that up and out and starts pulling you into that down and in. And it goes back to setting those warning mechanisms for yourself. Am I starting to feel frustrated? Why? Take a step back. Am I starting to feel irritated? Why? Take a step back. Super self-analytical. And again, the biggest thing to watch out for, like I opened with on the characteristics, is ego. Planning is awesome. You have to have a plan, but you have to understand that no plan is perfect. No plan will ever be complete. You're never going to have enough time as you want to make the perfect plan. You have to expect that there's going to be last-minute deviations, and you have to be prepared to make decisions. That's true of business. It's true of the military. It's true of how I ran my affiliate when I owned one. I used to have the best programming in the world. It just didn't work for anybody. So I was just looking for that perfect set of clients, right? You guys have all experienced that? Why don't my clients flourish? I don't understand what the problem is. And it all ties together. So you got to have that mindset. See the whole board. So we're going to go, the last I'm going to cover with is decisions, because that's like the basic leadership stuff. That's how we train our leaders to think. Those are the characteristics that we're looking for. But when it comes down to actually making decisions, there's some key takeaways, and there's a little bit of things that I think are often portrayed as magic that are absolutely, they're everything but magic. This is where we have to talk about movies, as much as I hate them. Who's seen Lone Survivor? It's trash. I was at a seminar one time, and I was actually using it as an example, and somebody's like, don't tell me how it ended. Like, it's called Lone Survivor. You're an idiot. Like, Okay. What's another good one? Zero Dark 30, Act of Valor. It sucks that I have so many to choose from. The only one that was accurate in his documentary is the Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen. That one's perfectly accurate, with mustaches and MP5s and jumping off of bridges. It sets a really bad example because all those movies are shoot 'em up movies. Boom, boom, boom. Things are blown up and people are making decisions, and it's like, even though things are going wrong, it's like all the right decisions are made, and it sets this example that's terrible, and it disregards how you actually get to that point. The real movie about the SEAL teams would be the most boring movie you've ever seen in your life, because on target, like I said, is like 0.01% of what we do. Our average planning cycle is 72 hours. And I've almost gotten into fist fights with people over whether or not we should use like a Helvetica in bold or a Times New Roman italicized in 12. Like, I'm not joking. We'll fight over that stuff because we spend so much time planning and we want our slides to be perfect that we literally will lose sight of the forest for the trees over a font. But none of that makes it into the movie. You don't see the contingency planning that we do. You don't see the hours we spend looking at maps. It's just a movie where a guy is shooting and he never misses, which is amazing considering they're on full auto and you never do that ever. But it points back to the biggest lie that I've ever seen when it comes to training. When it comes to training leadership, when it comes to training people, whether it be mentally or physically prepared. And it's the fallacy that you're going to rise to the occasion. Who's ever heard that? I don't need to do that. It's fine. I'm good on game day. No problem. It's the biggest lie that I've ever heard. The reality is that you fall to the level of your training or to the level of your preparedness. Everybody will get lucky. I'm not going to discount that. And you might be anomalously lucky and get away with it more often than not. But at some point, you're going to fail because you're going to fall to the level of your preparedness or training. So when it comes to decision making, people think that in combat, we're making decisions really fast. And sometimes we are, but it's the vast minority of the time. Most of the time, what we're doing is we're following a branch diagram. So if you think of combat as a time-compressed, time-sensitive environment, what's the best way to make decisions in that environment? Before you get there. And that's what doesn't make it into the movies. We spend hours doing contingency planning, the what-ifs. We do that because our life can be on the line a lot of the times. But as a good leader, a good trainer, a good business owner, you need to be spending your time thinking not about day to day. I mean, obviously the requisite amount of time, I do 20% of that and 80% about what ifs. Because there's nothing that sucks more than having a round crack over your head, and instead of paying attention with your head up and out and looking at the board and knowing what you're going to do next, you're surprised by it. Now you're behind the power curve. Now you have to play catch up with your information gathering and processing. When consequences are on the line, that's when people start getting hurt and killed. That's when businesses start going awry. Because a perfect example for us would be helicopters. We rely on helicopters a ton. And if you want to look like a genius, it starts like this. We ask for 4 helicopters, they show up. We plan our mission based off 4 helicopters. 4 of them show up, good to go. We load them up with the minimum number of people that we leave. They try to rotate off the ground and one of them breaks. What do? Well, you're screwed unless you already put the time to think about what you're going to do. Because we only work at nighttime. Because I can see at night and they can't, and I don't play fair. So I don't want to waste any of that time. So what ends up happening is because we thought about that, it's like, okay, you 4 guys, you're not going tonight. Get out of here. You guys shift to the other helicopter. And boom, you're off and running in 5 minutes. To higher level headquarters, what do you look like? Genius. Looks like you made this crazy decision in the moment, and you didn't. You followed a branch diagram. If this happens, we do this. If this happens, we do that. So that's what we're doing while we're planning. We're thinking about all that stuff that we can't control that could happen. But like I said, right, no plan's perfect. So at some point you have to go and execute your plan. Maybe that's a training protocol for your athlete. You go and you execute your plan. You're still going to have to make decisions. But you can forward think or you can reactively think. Which one would you guys rather do? Proactive or reactive thought? Which one's better? Proactive, if you want to survive over a long enough period of time. So what that looks like for us is the helicopters drop us off, and now we got to walk in. So we start walking. Sometimes we'd walk like 20 kilometers, which sucks. But the whole time that I'm walking, let's say there's 10 guys in a row. The first guy's got a job. He's navigating. Second guy, he's got the radio. He has to talk to everybody. Aircraft, medevac platform, satellite. I'm behind that guy. I'm the third guy. Then there's a corpsman. There's a weapons gunner. Then there's the JTAC, and all of these specialties along the line. So they all have their job, and they're doing their job. My job is that every step that I take as we're walking through a valley or through terrain that's changing is to go, okay, in the next 30 seconds, if something happens straight ahead, what am I going to do? I like this terrain over here. We're going to go over there. Something happens from over there. Okay, what am I going to do? Where am I going to move my guys? In every single direction. And then as the terrain shifts, I have to shift my plan. On and on and on. So then when something does happen, again, are you really making a decision? Not really, but you look like a genius because it comes off that fast. You're working with an athlete, right? You got a plan for where they should be, where their performance is going to be. You're monitoring their progress, and it's not going the way that you want it to go. When do you want to recognize that and make the shift? When it's 3 weeks down the road, 4 weeks down the road, 2 months down the road? Or how about the whole time you're watching your athlete, you're watching what's working and what's not? You're looking at the training, you're making those decisions as they happen. It makes you look like a genius when you don't really have to be. Have options in mind before you go into that training session. I used to do this all the time when I was unprepared as an affiliate owner. Somebody would come in for like a private training session. Who's ever done this? And you realize like 20 minutes before they came in that they're coming because you totally forgot about it. So you completely make something up on the fly, like this is going to be just fine. And you're just making stuff up like 30 seconds ahead of time, and it's the worst feeling in the world because you're just praying they don't figure out you're an amateur. Versus, not that that ever has happened to me, but like I know some people. Versus, like, you write it out and you have a full game plan with some options in case they come in and they have a tweaked shoulder. And it's just like boom, 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 boom. Those are good training sessions. The ones where you're flying by the seat of your pants, not good training sessions. Proactive versus reactive thought. If you're going to be proactive, what do you think is one thing that's going to get in your way every single time? Micromanaging others. Why? You can't look at everything else. You're trying to tell other people how to do their jobs instead of trying to figure out what you're going to do in case something happens. All right, takeaways. Then I'm going to shut my mouth. And then I think John and I are going to come up here and we're going to run our mouths a little bit more. From a practical perspective, covered actually quite a bit of stuff. 3 things I'll leave you guys with. Inspire your people, don't micromanage them. And how do you do that? You set the standard. What you allow in your presence is your standard. You have to set that for your people. If you tell your people they need to be on time and you show up 20 minutes late, you're an asshole, all right? And then you can't hold them accountable for that. You need to set the standard for your people. That starts with, I think it was you, when I asked when should you start being a leader, one of you two said yesterday. That's a good answer. From this moment on, think of yourself as a leader that you want to be. Practice. Internally practice. I teach people to start practicing their emotions when they're driving their cars because it's a great place where we encounter emotions. The guy who cut you off probably didn't really mean to, but what's our natural reaction as guys? Yeah, okay, guess what? That's a natural reaction in combat too, and we see it in training, and you have to beat it out of people because as soon as you engage at that level, your brain is completely shut off. You're like back to caveman style. So when you're driving your car, sit back on your drive home tonight and recognize how many times emotions will come flooding in and they'll hit you a little bit. If you can learn to control that and avoid that, you'll actually become a better driver because you're a better decision maker. Practice self-control, decision making, the calm under fire. When it comes to making decisions, like I said, most people are afraid of failure more than anything else. And I'll close with it just in reference to kind of what it feels like to get ambushed. It's not a good feeling. And the most dangerous thing you can do when you're ambushed, does anyone want to take a guess? Is nothing. Well, not being prepared is one, but the most dangerous thing you can do is stand there. If somebody decides to shoot at you, they're doing it for a reason because they see a vulnerability in you that you may not see. You have to get off the X. And by the X, what I'm talking about in military terms, that's where the rounds are impacting. It's better to make a bad decision to get off the X, to gain some momentum, and correct for it fast. but get moving instead of being paralyzed by analysis. I mean, it's 2016. Everybody I know except for Luke has an iPhone. But you guys, I love the scroll wheel of death on the Mac, right? Like, oh shit, what's going on here? This isn't what I want to see. Anybody ever seen that? One of their leaders? It's not a good thing. Nothing good's happening behind there. The way to avoid that is make a decision. It can be a small decision, but just get off the X, all right? The worst thing you can do is do nothing. Questions? It's a lot of stuff. Zero barbell talk.
Well, Andy, what we'll do is we'll have a whole Q&A round with you and John up there. Is that cool?
I don't know if John's qualified.
All right. Well, who feels qualified? If John's not, anybody?
I think he's good.
All right. Well, thanks, Andy. How about that? Let's give Andy a little round of applause. And then people, we have 10 minutes. Use the washroom, stand up, mingle. One thing I forgot to say is some of you got white name tags. You're the noobs, okay? Look for people with the black name tag. They've been here before. So get to know one another. Start to expand your network because that's what's made this thing so powerful is expanding this global network from this symposium, guys, all right? So 10 minutes and then we'll meet back here. Thanks.